Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Is it hot enough for you? A heat dome is slowly moving across the country, and it's taking hundreds of historic high temperature records along with it. The Tohono Nation in southern Arizona is among tribes issuing an extreme heat warning after the thermometer hit 108 degrees, an event rare this time of year even in Arizona. And climate experts say the heat is going to be a factor for the foreseeable future. We'll talk about what's at stake right after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Jill Freitas. The Federal Emergency Management Agency last week opened $1 billion in grants for disaster management. The news comes after the agency terminated the program for that work a year ago. But a federal court found that termination unlawful and ordered the agency to restart it. Aliona Naiden with the Alaska Desk has more on what that means for some tribes in Alaska.
FEMA opened applications for a program to help communities protect themselves from fires, floods, earthquakes, and hurricanes. The agency canceled the program last year, but a federal judge in the U.S. District of Massachusetts ordered that the agency reinstate the funding. Dustin Ivan is Tribal Resilience Coordinator for the village of Kwigillingok in western Alaska, one of the villages hit hardest by the ex-typhoon Halong. The village participated in the FEMA program before it was canceled. Ivan says it is still unclear how useful the new version of the program will be for Alaska villages like his.
There's good news, but we'll see how it goes. A lot of these grants don't really fit our rural Alaska villages. Last
spring, FEMA canceled its program called Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, also known as BRIC. The agency called it wasteful, ineffective, and too concerned with political agendas. 20 states sued FEMA in response. Kwigillingok residents for years have been working to protect themselves from flooding and erosion and voted to relocate several years ago. In 2022, the village was accepted into the BRIC program to select a relocation site. Village leaders also applied for another BRIC grant to do a feasibility study for the site, but the program was canceled.
We're all devastated. It's like a year and a half of work all down the drain.
FEMA said BRIC has a few changes following the order to relaunch. The agency said it will eliminate phased projects, funding for hazard mitigation planning, and technical assistance provisions, the very things that tribes like Kwigillingok applied for in the past. Ivan says he's concerned that the agency is not planning to do phased projects.
Alaska has 4 seasons, and we can only do summer to freeze-up projects. The project we were planning was going to be a multi-year and in phases.
The application for the program is open until late July. In Anchorage, I am Aliona Naiden.
A new partnership between journalism and legal experts aims to improve how stories are reported across Indian country. The Indigenous Journalists Association and the Center for Indigenous Law and Justice at UC Berkeley School of Law announced a national collaboration this week focused on strengthening coverage of Native nations. The effort will provide journalists with training in federal Indian law, tribal sovereignty, and best practices for reporting in Native communities. Mary Lopez Kiefer, executive director of the Center of Indigenous Law and Justice, said in a joint statement announcing the partnership, quote, "By working together, we can ensure that reporting on Indian country is grounded in legal accuracy, cultural respect, and a deeper understanding of tribal governance." Leaders say many of the most important issues in Indian country, like missing and murdered Indigenous people, water rights, and child welfare, are shaped by complex legal systems that are often misunderstood. Organizers say the collaboration will include workshops, webinars, and national training opportunities aimed at improving the accuracy and integrity of reporting on Native nations. I'm Jill Freitas.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Support for law and justice-related programming provided by Hobbs, Strauss, Dean & Walker, LLP, a national law firm dedicated to promoting and defending tribal rights for over 40 years. More information available at hobbsstrauss.com.
Hear that? Tribal college faculty do so much, one can't say it all here. Nothing but respect. Visit mostthoroughdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network. This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Summer temperatures in Arizona are typically among the hottest in the country, but they're not usually this hot this early. A handful of locations in Arizona and Southern California just reached 112 degrees. That is the highest March temperature ever recorded in the U.S. The same weather system that brought those high temperatures also burned off an already meager snowpack in California, Colorado, and other mountain states, setting up the potential for worsening drought conditions in the West. And forecasters say it's only going to get worse. The trend for extreme weather shows a steady curve upward. Today we'll hear from people in the path of that trend. Tribal officials and others in Arizona are bracing for a hotter, drier summer this year and the continuation of the same from here on out. What can be done and what should be done to confront more frequent extreme weather? You can join this conversation. Call us today at 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us from Winslow, Arizona is Mayor Roberta Birdie Wilcox Cano. She is Dene, and she is, of course, the mayor of the city of Winslow. Mayor Cano, good morning, and welcome to our show.
Yeah. Hi, yes, Yate. Good morning.
Yate.
Glad to be here today.
Great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. In Phoenix, Arizona, we are joined by Dr. Eugene LeVar. He is the Chief Heat Officer for Arizona Department of Health Services. Dr. LeVar, good morning to you as well. Great to have you on our show.
Good morning, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Joining us on Zoom in Tucson, Arizona, we have Mary Kathleen Wilson. She is a climate journalist and advocate. She is Fauna Otham. Kathy, good morning to you as well. Great to have you on Native America Calling.
Skukbash, good day from Tucson, Arizona.
Thank you for that greeting, Kathy. And joining us from San Diego, California, our fourth guest is Alexander Sasha Gershonov. He is a research meteorologist for the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at the University of California, San Diego. Sasha, good morning. Welcome to Native America Calling.
Thanks for inviting me, Sean. It's good to be with all of you.
Yeah, certainly. It's great to have all of you on the show today. Thank you all for your time. And Dr. LeVar, I want to begin with you. Temperatures peaked at 112 degrees for the very first time in southern Arizona. What does that mean in terms of what the state has to think about going forward?
I think what it means is, it used to be that we only thought about heat during heat season, and that was usually from May to September. And I think with recent events that we saw in March and things that we saw in 2024, with high temperatures extending into October, it's really a reminder that we need to think about heat awareness, heat education, and heat preparedness pretty much 12 months out of the year in Arizona, and just try to make sure everybody's aware of where to find information, also just to have that awareness and education on how they can protect themselves, their families, and neighbors from heat year-round at this point.
Dr. LeVar, you are the state's first chief heat officer, and this is interesting because you are overseeing Governor Katie Hobbs' extreme heat preparedness plan, and that does include a focus on Native American tribes. Tell me how you're currently working with tribal governments to address these expected heat extreme events this summer.
Yes, we work really close with our tribal liaison here at ADHS to help make sure that we are listening to any tribal needs or voices that may be out there. Also connecting with tribal heat points of contact. We have a designated list for each tribe within Arizona and a point of contact that we can utilize to help make sure that they receive information, are aware of activities, and have a point of contact to work with in case anything does come up as we go forward. We've also performed dedicated tribal listening sessions. We had one recently at our third annual Arizona Heat Summit to ensure that Indigenous voices are central to the statewide extreme heat planning that we move forward with. And we've had additional sessions at rural areas such as Parker, Benson, Sedona, and Somerton to capture local experiences across Arizona and the diverse rural landscape that we have within our state. And so we also do outreach to make sure that heat relief resources are made available and get input to make sure that we are culturally sensitive for anything, any resources or any efforts that are designated to help our tribal partners within the state.
Okay. And what are you hearing from the tribes? What are their concerns? What are their needs right now?
You know, I think we're hearing a variety of items that we're working with and things that are still need to be assessed and figure out how we can move forward in tandem to see how we can deal with heat within our state. Some of it we know are infrastructure barriers that are happening within our tribal communities, such as geographic isolation and tough terrain that make it harder to build roads, water, and electrical infrastructure. We know that there's some common rural concerns and dilemmas that are out there, such as many residents cannot leave their homes and may not be willing to go to a cooling center because they cannot leave livestock, property, or family members unprotected. And there could also be service inconsistencies happening within our tribal and rural areas, such as a lack of steady electricity connection for AC, clean water for hydration, or reliable cell service for emergency alerts to be received by those who need to. And there's also communication gaps. We've heard, local partners have reported some discoordination about information flow and unmet supply requests that highlight a need for local and state and federal levels to close the loop on those communications, amongst other items that we've heard through listening sessions and other mechanisms.
Dr. LeVar, thank you for kicking off our conversation today here on Native America Calling. The number 1-800-99-NATIVE for any listeners who would like to join us. I'm thinking perhaps of some folks right now who are in Arizona and you're experiencing some of this record heat that we're talking about today. You've been through it before and you're experiencing it again. Give us a call. Let us know your concerns or perhaps your perspectives on what's going on. 1-800-99-NATIVE. Mayor Cano, Winslow, Arizona, I want to ask you to join the conversation now because Winslow shattered a heat record in February of last year. How are you preparing for extreme heat this year and into the future?
Well, I kind of mentioned it earlier in a conversation that part of what we're thinking of in the future is just how are we going to utilize our resources and protect them more than just personal addressing the heat, and of course, we're going to promote everything that's out there, especially like from our state leadership and things like that for heat emergencies and things like that. But I'm thinking in the big picture of the future of our water conservation, being good stewards of our land and our people, and just in our tribal neighbors in Navajo and Hopi. How do we help them also deal with some of this extreme heat with livestock, with, a lot, like was mentioned before, there's a lot of areas that don't have electricity, that don't have access to water. A lot of those people come to our city for those things, for water and supplies and things like that. So I think just working closely with tribal leaders and what are the needs that we can assist with, being that, we're bordering right up against our two closest tribal communities. That's the big thing, is just making sure everybody's safe. And then, but yeah, the future, we're being very mindful on what type of industries and new businesses approach us, anything that's over consuming. The alarming thing to me is the fact that, I felt like we didn't have a winter. We had a very mild winter and very little precipitation or snow. And I was kind of thinking like, well, it seems like it's being pushed back every year a little more into the spring. So I was excited for March because usually we have another big storm in March, and that just didn't happen. It was, the unseasonably, warm. We were up in the high 80s this year, which is usually not due until the end of May. So it's very concerning, very alarming. The good news is we got a really decent rain last night, so that's hopeful. But that's really the long-term. What are we doing to conserve water? What are we doing to prepare for some of these drought conditions? And how will we move forward in the future as a city? Being mindful stewards of everything. So, we're just kind of taking it a day at a time, and hopefully the citizens are on board too with that conservation mentality. That's
Mayor,
pretty much where we're at. Yes.
Sure. Yeah. And as you just mentioned, it was a very mild winter in northern Arizona and also historically dry. And you folks have already been experiencing long-term drought. What are you thinking about overall? I mean, you mentioned the need to conserve resources, to conserve water, and other maybe lifestyle changes that community members can take. But really big picture, long term, what is it going to take to ultimately address these longstanding drought issues? And is there any solution really that's going to be a permanent fix with regard to it? It just seems like so much less water than in the past in your part of the country.
Right. Yeah. So, I don't know if it's anything that one person could identify or fix. It's just, just being aware that our climate is changing and that we have to adapt to a new way of living. I think that's probably the biggest advocacy we could do as a community and, in our region is just, the way we had always done things is going to be having to evolve into a much more, like I said, kind of conservative and just being very mindful of what resources we have and protect them. So that's how we're looking at the future of moving forward. And, if there's education, just putting things out there that, we need to make sure our young people understand the future and how we need to, protect our environment. So.
Thanks, Mayor. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. The landmark jury verdict against social media giants Meta and Google could be a sign that momentum is shifting for consumers. What restrictions should be in place for social media use, and how can individuals protect themselves going forward? We'll hear more about it on the next Native America Calling.
Who protects Indian country? Amerant does. As the only 100% tribally owned insurance carrier, Amerant helps strengthen tribal communities by providing reliable insurance coverage and keeping dollars in Indian country. From property and liability to commercial auto and tribal workers' compensation, Amerant is here to protect what matters. Celebrating 40 years of serving Indian country. Learn more at amerant.com. That's AMERIND.com.
You are listening to Native America Calling, and today we're getting perspectives on increasing temperatures and the increasing number of extreme weather events occurring all over the globe. A hot weather system across the West just notched the hottest temperature ever recorded in the U.S. in March. Officials are having to cope with dangerous heat earlier in the year, and many experts warn this is just the beginning. Join us. We'd like to hear your thoughts and your perspectives. You can call 1-800-996-2848. Our producers are standing by, waiting for your call. That number again, 1-800-99-NATIVE. I want to go back to Chief Heat Officer for Arizona Department of Health Services, Dr. Eugene LeVar. And Dr. LeVar, in Maricopa County, this is just a startling statistic here. There were 427 heat-related deaths reported in 2025. That was a small decline from previous years. What's the trend in terms of addressing these increasingly hot summer temperatures statewide? And in this case, of course, deadly consequences here.
Of course. Looking at the heat-related deaths that are being reported, and I know Maricopa County recently had put out 427 deaths. I think it's important to see that over the last 2 years, we have had a decline in heat-related deaths, although we look at every heat-related death as preventable and would love to see that at zero. And I think there's been a lot of coordination happening on the local and the state level to help make sure that efforts are being coordinated going forward. And I think there's some innovation happening to help address this. One of the things we've done as the state is we launched our centralized website of heat.az.gov. That consolidates heat safety tools, information such as financial assistance for light heat programs, and information on workplace protections all in one place. So citizens across the state will have a place to go to and kind of have a one-stop shop to be able to get that type of information. Other things that we've done to kind of address some of these things is redesign our heat relief site map to include information for those who may be interested in going to a heat relief site of those that may have wraparound services, those that have ADA compliance, and what capacity of ADA compliance do they have. We've also been able to incorporate donation stations and those information even on some of our tribal communities, so that can be known where to go to. And we've had utility integration. We've seen APS, one of our large utility providers, integrate our heat relief map into information that they send out to their customers. But I think one of the things you really have to look at going forward, too, is we need to lean on each other. And one of the big things that we do promote is kind of a check on your neighbor and family campaign. We saw with the pandemic there was social isolation happening that was needed and recommended, but how can we break down those barriers and get to know those who are around us and find out whether or not they're in need? And so we do promote a community check on your neighbor campaign so that we can make sure that those who are in need can hopefully work with their neighbors and be able to get information such as heat.az.gov and know where to go to be able to get resources and such as we go forward. But there's also need to focus on long-term resilience, and that I think you heard mentioned just a little bit earlier too.
Yeah. And Dr. LeVar, I also want to ask you with regard to some of these resources that you're discussing. Now, my understanding is that most of the heat-related deaths, the victims were unsheltered people, unhoused people. And of course, Native Americans are experiencing high rates of homelessness. Web tools, other tech type solutions, or even just being able to check on relatives or loved ones. How do you address that specifically with the homeless population?
Really looking at the heat-related deaths and the numbers, we saw that split where we did see the unhoused and those who are housing burdened being a larger percentage. And we've actually kind of seen that flip a little bit with the latest numbers, with getting pretty even splits between the unhoused and the housed and those who may have to make hard decisions around cooling and food and utilities and other pieces come into play on that end. But really what we do is we work really closely with our faith-based organizations and our community-based organizations to make sure that they have information to be able to share directly if there is a need for that. One of the things we have done and worked with some of the community organizers that are out there is a lot of the unhoused have cell phones and an ability to connect to resources, but they need some place to charge those items. And that's where heat relief sites can really come into play, giving them an opportunity to cool down, to get a snack, something to drink, to charge their phones so that they can stay connected and be able to connect to those resources that they wish to do so, and receive information on wraparound services such as naloxone, substance use disorder, healthcare through access, or maybe they're in need of some counseling through 988. And that's really having that wraparound holistic view and approach when we're thinking about heat relief sites and efforts within our state.
All right. Thank you, Dr. LeVar, for joining the show today. 1-800-99-NATIVE for listeners who would like to join us. And back to Mayor Roberta Birdie Wilcox Cano. And Mayor, let's talk a little bit about how the heat is impacting business. And specifically, I know you are focused there in Winslow on expanding economic development. How are these heat and drought issues impeding that pursuit right now?
Well, it's really like I stated before, it's really giving us like a different perspective on what we're actually going to be allowing to come into the city. At one point in time, there could have, we might have been like, oh, we're open for business. Let's entertain everything. But we just recently redid our general plan, which also includes a very stringent guidelines on like any industry that utilizes water consumption, things like that. Just because we see the forecast for the future being what it is, the temperatures are increasing. We do have a very healthy water table right now, and we do have some reservoirs that are doing well, but we know that could easily change in the coming years. So, like I said, we just have really put in place some safety nets and things for growth as far as industries go and things like that. And then, we are somewhat of a tourist town. We do have, a lot of visitors that come, and, they were prepared for winter conditions, coming in this, starting in March, and, people are running around downtown in shorts and, tank tops and things like that. So, I could see our July being something similar to maybe like a closer to the valley in Phoenix, and having those higher temperatures, 105, 110, where normally we would be like in the 98 degree area. People may not want to be coming to our region because of how hot it is. So that's going to be a huge detriment on our local businesses and things like that. So hopefully we can develop some plans in place with some of our businesses and business owners to maybe have heat stations, just education, lots of ability to hydrate and have, cooling areas and stations, things like that for people that are visiting our city. So, yeah, it's going to be very telling how to move forward in the future with tourism, with everything. So, yes, we're just trying to, plan for the future.
All right, thank you again, Mayor, for joining the show today. Let's hear now from Mary Kathleen Wilson. She is a climate journalist and advocate, also a citizen of the Tohono Nation. And Kathy, you write about environmental and climate issues. What toll does extreme heat take on the people and agriculture where you are?
Well, what we're finding with these higher temperatures as they increase, they're putting a real pressure on our water systems. And as the former water director, Celso Villegas, explained, there's less recharge in the ground, there's more evaporation. It's also affecting our health, especially in communities already dealing with our high rates of diabetes. So this isn't just environmental, it's a public health issue.
A public health issue, right. What measures are in place then right now, specifically amongst the Tohono O'odham people, to mitigate these extreme effects of heat? And again, from a public health standpoint, I'm still shocked by that number, even though apparently it's improved, but still 427 heat-related deaths last year in Maricopa County. It's just astounding.
It is astounding. Well, as far as health goes, when you have a population or a community that has that are diagnosed in diabetes at very high rates, when that heat increases dehydration, and that puts stress on the heart, and it can make it harder for the body to regulate your blood sugar. It can also affect how the insulin works. So people can become very unstable more quickly under these extreme temperatures.
Now, you've described Tohono O'odham as being in what you refer to as a mega drought. Tell me more about how that affects daily life. I'm thinking about people just going about their business, going back and forth to work, or children maybe walking to school, or even how people secure food and water and other just daily tasks of life.
Well, I can mention how the Sanivir district came together and put together their own climate adaptation plan because their agriculture was being affected. The Tohono Nation doesn't have one adaptation plan, it has two adaptation plans. And Sanivir district, remember that we are the size of Connecticut. We have over 34,000 tribal members. And what I've seen and heard about the plans and how they were struggling up in Santa Vera is these higher temperatures and less reliable water are making it hard to grow traditional foods. These growing seasons are shifting, and those impact not just food, but the culture. Because for us, agriculture just isn't about production, it's about our connection to our traditions, our culture, our himdag.
Right. Let's talk more about that term you just used, that concept, himdag. It's the Hana'atham worldview. Tell me more about the uniqueness of that worldview and lessons that we can all draw from to address extreme heat.
Well, our himdag is our way of life, and it's a relationship that we have to the land, to the water, and to all living things. And what's important, I believe, about the himdag is that it already has been teaching us to live in balance with a very harsh desert environment, the Sonoran Desert. So adaptation is not new to us. Our ancestors survived here and understanding these limits. They respected nature and they adjusted to the change accordingly. That knowledge is still relevant today. And one thing important about when we talk about the Himdag or the Thana'atham way of life, it's place specific. People in certain parts in different districts, they interpret that traditional way of life specific to their communities.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I do want to mention is that what our Himdag teaches is reciprocity. That's that our responsibility to use the land and to care for it so that it continue to care for us. I just interviewed recently the Thana'atham Community College elder who is helping run their farm extension program. And the one thing this elder said was, if you take care of the soil, it's going to take care of you.
Oh, that's profound. Yeah. Well, I read one of your pieces, and you also highlight the importance of traditional building practices and the materials that were used for many, many centuries. And these are materials that are perfectly adapted for dealing with extreme heat. And it sounds like people are still able to use some of those building practices today.
Right. What I did mention was Celso, and I would like to mention Celso Villegas, who recently passed. He was one of the authors, along with help from Carletta Chief at the Indigenous Resilience Team at the University of Arizona, who helped put together the main 2018, 2014 or 2018 climate adaptation plan for the tribe. And he recently passed away, and we just always want to honor those who have given so much for the tribe. Got a little choked up on that, so let me get back to talking about. And what Celso did was he made me aware of how the Babakivari district building itself was built out of adobe and how it was using water catch systems. And not only that, but long before we had our cooling centers, the Thana'atham, they collected water and we used to have 500 miles of tunnels that we used to catch water with traditionally. Like I just said, we're not strangers to adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
And not to mention, people still even use the ramada or the wato for cooling.
And for our listeners who might not be familiar with what that, describe that
Well,
for us,
wato,
please.
it's a
Yeah.
ramada made out of usually ocotillo or saguaro rib.
Okay. Kathy, we've got a couple of minutes before we have to take another break, but I'm interested in learning more. What goes into creating a climate adaptation plan? What kind of stakeholders and partners do you need to bring together, and how do you move forward with mapping out a long-term plan for a problem and a challenge as enormous as what we're talking about today?
Well, across the country, tribes are already taking a lot of action, and their climate adaptations are specific to their cultural needs. It includes water management strategies and restoring food systems. But what's needed is just more support for tribal-led solutions, which is more funding, of course, more inclusion of Indigenous knowledge in policy, and recognition that these solutions are already working. For the Thana'atham, as I mentioned, what went into both the main Tohono adaptation plan and the Sandomir adaptation plan was something that is part of our Himdag, and that is that we go around and we talk to everybody in the districts. We talk to everybody in the communities, and we get their ideas, and we find out what they would like. And by incorporating their knowledge, incorporating what they're seeing out in the field, which included these crops that were not they were not giving their food at the regular times of the year. Things like that, data like that. And if we brought these climate adaptations together, what we have is not just our science from the universities and everything. We're having the science on the ground from our traditional leaders and our people in the communities. And when you bring these two things together, you're utilizing something that Albert Marshall, who's a Micmac elder, said is two-eyed seeing. You're seeing with two eyes. You're seeing with the traditional lens, and you're seeing with the science climate lens. So it's better. And when we can teach others that climate solutions work best when you combine indigenous knowledge and science, this can help adaptation. It's not just technical, remember, it's relational, which means we are really connected to our land, so we know what's going on out there.
Mary
And that is
Kathleen
something.
Wilson. Absolutely. Yeah. We're going to take a short break, Kathy, but we'll come back. And we also have another guest on the show today, Alexander Sasha Gershonov, who is a research meteorologist at the University of California, San Diego. So Sasha is going to join us on the other side of this break. And we do have the phone lines open for any listeners who would like to join this conversation. Again, talking about extreme heat, extreme weather events occurring in parts of the Southwest and other parts of the United States right now. Give us a call, 1-800-99-NATIVE.
Tribal Development Partners believe strong infrastructure strengthens tribal sovereignty. Through the 105L lease program, TDP helps align federal funding systems with long-term tribal priorities. More at tribaldevpartners.com. Proud to support this show.
Need help identifying community priorities? Kaufman & Associates' approach to evaluation is rooted in indigenous knowledge, honoring tribal history, and sovereignty. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
We are glad you're with us today on Native America Calling. I'm your host, Sean Spruce. Many of our listeners right now are facing a hot, dry summer. Climate scientists say extreme weather events are becoming more frequent, and for many parts of the West, that means very hot weather and drought. We're also, a little bit later, going to hear from Native comedian Rob Fairbanks for a lighter take on the weather. But first, let's talk to Sasha Gershonov. He is a research meteorologist for the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at the University of California, San Diego. And Sasha, we're hearing about this heat dome across the United States right now. What exactly is a heat dome, and what's the significance of the one we're experiencing right now?
Well, Sean, a heat dome is basically high pressure in the atmosphere aloft, above the surface. And when that happens, it basically causes air to sink. And as it sinks, it goes to areas of higher pressure towards the surface. It warms, just like the air does in a bicycle pump as we pump it. As it's squeezed, it warms. So high pressure aloft promotes warming. It also promotes clear sky, sunny conditions, and it traps the heat at the surface. And these are associated with long waves in the jet stream pattern. And, that happens naturally, but what is unusual about this is, first of all, it's unprecedented in terms of the high pressure and the extent of it over the Southwest that we're experiencing. And of course, it's also unprecedented in terms of the temperatures that people are experiencing at the surface, especially for this time of year. And heat waves have been getting warmer, hotter, more extensive, longer lasting, more frequent as the world warms. And that's happening all over the world. In fact, of all the extreme weather events out there, heat waves are the most directly related, the most sensitive to the global warming that's being experienced. And in the Southwest in particular, and specifically for summertime heat, it's also changing flavor. It's becoming more humid and more expressed in nighttime temperatures, which is kind of a double whammy for health. So I'd like to also chime in with other guests about the public health implications of this. Out of all the weather extremes out there, not only are heat waves the most directly related to global warming, they're also the biggest. They cause more health impacts than any other weather event. And often they're called the silent killers because, of course, there's no destruction happening with heat waves. But that is the unfortunate thing.
Okay. Sasha, hotter, longer, drier, deadlier, all the adjectives that we don't want to hear, you're applying them, of course. What's the outlook for the rest of the year? What do you expect?
What I expect is very dry conditions going into late spring, early summer, because not only are we experiencing this heat wave in March, but winter has been extremely warm in all of the West. And even though we haven't experienced a severe meteorological drought, the amount of precipitation, it's close to average for most of the West. But because it's been so warm, a lot of that fell as rain rather than snow. So what we're experiencing is a snow drought. And so the little snow that fell is melting much earlier and much faster because of this unprecedented hot March. And so what I expect is very dry soils, dry vegetation, and fire risk basically much more elevated and much earlier than normal. And of course, how extreme that's going to get depends on how hot the summer is going to get and how what is the heat wave activity going to look like over the summer as well, which also promotes wildfires as well. And of course, when the environment is so dry, the heat waves that do occur, they tend to be hotter because there's less moisture to evaporate. So more of that energy goes into heating the surface.
Let's talk more about wildfires. What parts of the country right now are you most concerned about with fires this summer?
Well, I mean, I'm concerned about the entire West and Southwest, and probably especially the Four Corners region, and especially mountainous regions that would normally be covered by snow at this time of year. So those are the places, the forests, the montane forests. I'm concerned that they're going to be at an extremely dry and flammable level.
Sasha, is there any way to turn this around? I mean, really, we continue to do these shows every year. It's like, oh, geez, the risk is just this much worse with fire season. We're seeing these higher temperatures, increasing droughts. It's just, it really does make someone wonder just how do we turn this around?
Well, that's a loaded question, Sean. I mean, the less we adapt and the less we mitigate, the more we're going to suffer. If you mean how do we turn the global climate change around, it has to start by reducing our dependence on fossil fuels, and that can be on the personal level. It can be but it really needs to be on the national and global level. And we really need to stop talking about only the costs of climate change mitigation. We need to also talk about the co-benefits of climate change mitigation, because it makes sense to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels for so many other reasons as well. Just imagine the benefits to health, both physical and mental health, from reducing our personal carbon footprints. I can talk for hours about that, but go all the way up to the national and global scale and imagine the benefits of national and global security if we can reduce our dependence, our demand for fossil fuels, so that countries like Iran and Russia are not able to afford their aggressive behavior, making wars on their neighbors. These are fossil-fueled wars. And the war in Iran right now is a fossil-inspired and fueled war. Imagine the benefits of not having to deal with that, of not relying so much on fossil fuels. And of course, for the climate itself, if we reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, reduce our consumption of fossil fuels, the climate is going to take a few decades to stabilize, because it's already loaded with, the atmosphere is loaded with carbon dioxide. But the benefits, the co-benefits of our reduced dependence on fossil fuels, we're going to see much, much earlier.
Okay. But ultimately, we really need to be thinking about our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, who could ultimately be the beneficiaries of some of these changes that you're describing, Sasha. Let's talk about Southern California, where you are. Driest and warmest March on record, like what we've seen in parts of Arizona. What are the consequences where you are locally right now?
Well, we are experiencing also a very warm winter, dry winter, and also the sea surface temperatures are hot, extremely warm, basically at unprecedented levels, and basically that impacts the heat of the coastal zone. I think we here in Southern California are accustomed to heat events, even in the wintertime. They're associated with our downslope, dry, gusty winds that also promote the most catastrophic wildfires around here, the Santa Ana winds. And those cause heat waves. Even in winter, they can send people to the hospital. But this winter, we've had, a very unusual heat wave at the end of February that was not associated with the Santa Ana wind. And then 3 or 4 other heat waves that basically made this early spring clearly the hottest. In fact, I was looking at some data, and it looks like in Southern California, this March was about 10 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than the long-term average.
All right,
unprecedented.
Sasha. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining the show. We're going to close out by getting a lighter view of the weather in recognition of today being April Fool's Day. And to do that, we are joined by Leech Lake Ojibwe comedian Rob Fairbanks, who is known for his character, the Rez Reporter, giving unique takes on the weather and other topics. We thought we'd reach out to him today and chat with him about the weather. He joins us now from Bemidji, Minnesota. Rob, welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's just brownish out here right now up in towards Cass Lake. Yeah, you get outside looks just brown right now. But yeah, we got some snow earlier. I thought it was spring, but I guess Mother Nature said April Fools to you, and gave us a bunch of snow. Yeah, right now we're just back to being brown again. over here on Leech Lake Reservation right now, and I haven't seen much bugs out yet. I ain't seen like those old mosquitoes or nothing. They come around like the res dogs. They know when it's time to eat, come around and they come around like it's a potluck because they all come. That's it.
Oh, somebody ringing the dinner bell. Rob, what about any ice fishing possible right now? Do you have enough lake ice going there?
I don't think so. It's pretty open. I haven't seen any brave ones out there. Usually I'll see a couple brave ones out there, man. But I haven't seen not yet. It's just there's a lot of open water now and a lot of slush, and so I think it's just bad. The ice conditions on top is just bad up here right now because it's been pretty warm so far.
Uh-huh. Now, earlier in the show, we were talking to some folks in Arizona, and they're a little worried right now about how the climate is changing. What do people up in Minnesota think about this?
Well, we've definitely been having some, weather I've never experienced there, just kind of throwing me off here, as far as our weather just is up and down. So roller coaster, it's kind of hard to predict. That's why they make fun of the weatherman, because the weatherman always says you got a 50-50 chance of rain, so that's all the time.
I've always thought it'd be cool to be a weather reporter because even if you're wrong, it's like, we'll just try it again tomorrow. No big deal, right? There's not like a whole lot of accountability. But, well, there is, though. I shouldn't say that. I mean, I know a lot of people depend on you to get the weather right. Tell me more about the reservations up in Minnesota and how the weather might be a little bit different there than other parts of the state.
Well, a lot of bands, we our lives kind of go by the seasons. You got your fishing seasons, you got your hunting seasons, you got your. They just got done doing maple sugar camps out, and so they were doing that, and it's anytime the weather changes, especially when they do the maple syrup. I know they only have a short time when the trees are sapping. So they only have a certain amount of time to gather their sap, so.
Rob, tell me more about what goes into creating your weather takes. Now, do you script these in advance or you just improvise them? What's your whole thought process like?
Just kind of just what I'm been thinking about, or something will remind me of something. I'll think of a moment, or I'll hear something I heard, or they're little bits of me, and then. The Res Reporter character is a lot like my uncle, who was like the storyteller of the family, you know what I mean? So for me, it's always been some part of our culture that I like to share with other people, and for me, this is a way to do it, is to share that part of my culture with everybody, and let them know where I'm from and, just give them a little piece of my life, I guess.
Well, tell me more. What do you have planned going forward, and how can people follow you? I know you're on social media, and you've got a fan base that extends all across Indian country, far beyond just Minnesota.
Yeah, it's crazy. When I first started doing the videos in 2014, I was just doing them on Facebook, and YouTube and stuff, and they were just for fun, for my, funny jokes, to my family and friends. I thought they were just funny, and I never thought they were going to take off as far as they did, and people they can see me on all platforms like Instagram. You can see me on Res Reporter, I'm on YouTube, Rob Fairbanks, I'm on Facebook, it just really took off, across especially social media has opened the door so much because it reaches out to so far, and I always tell young people, use your social media platform to get your voice heard, and get your name out there on whatever it is you're doing, because it's a powerful tool, and yeah, I have a fan base out in Siberia, and of all places, and it's just crazy to think, you got, I call them, my groupies, I call them Resies now, because they're Res Reporter groupies, so I call them Resies over there. So, it's a growing thing, I guess.
It sure sounds like it, brother. Thank you for joining us today. That was the Res Reporter, Rob Fairbanks, one of our guests, along with Mayor Roberta Cano, Dr. Eugene LeVar, Alexander Sasha Gershinoff, and also Mary Kathleen Wilson. We're back again tomorrow. We'll talk about the benefits and threats of social media and what might change after a recent jury verdict against social media companies. I'm Sean Spruce. You've been listening to the one, the only Native America Calling. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Tribal colleges and universities support their students in countless ways. They say I believe and offer help before it's asked.
Hear that? That's everything tribal college faculty do for their students on Fast Forward. Because if one tried to say it in real time, they'd be here all day. They teach, guide, comfort, and connect. And for that, the community is grateful. Learn more at mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
They give extensions, cheer progress, share laughter, create calm, and allow reflection. They inspire hope, share wisdom, guide gently, validate feelings.
Attention tribal community leaders. The 2026 Tribal Self-Governance Conference takes place this April 7th to the 9th at the Gila River Wild Horse Pass Resort and Casino in Chandler, Arizona. Tribal delegation meetings using AI, Indian Health 101, land stewardship, tribal values-based communications training, understanding the tribal-federal relationship, and more, all at one convening. The full draft agenda and registration are available at tribalselfgov.org, who support this show.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Quantic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.